So welcome everybody to today's new perspective. As you all know, this is a free program that we offer every Saturday here at the LaGrasse Shirabindo Integral Life Center in Fountain in South Carolina. And we just wanted to make everyone aware that all these new perspectives webinars that we have conducted over the last 2 to 3 years are recorded and available in our knowledge bank. And that knowledge bank, which I'll be putting the URL in the chat box shortly, has over 250, 300 of these webinars and films and meditations that you can search by subject or by author or by topic. We do kindly ask for your support in the continuation of this and other free programs that we're offering here at the LaGrasse. And of course, donations of any amount are graciously accepted and appreciated. Again, I'll be putting the chat box our URL website where you can go and visit the Knowledge Bank, as well as the URL where you can make donations. We really thank you in advance for your support in this endeavor. So today is the third in a series of New Perspectives talks, and part 3, the psychic being after leaving the body. Joining us today is our dear friend and community member, Robin Blunt. We welcome you, Robin, and very much look forward to your talk today. He will be speaking on the Tibetan's Book of the Dead. In Tibetan Buddhism, the transition from this life to the next is what is called bardo, which means gap. And Robin says that many bardos happen to us throughout our lives, death being the greatest. In the Tibetan Book of Dead, Robin will explain how life is seen as an opportunity to fine-tune the mind to reside in the spaciousness of consciousness called Rigpa. Meditation is seen as the greatest gift in life and the way to achieve enlightenment, which makes the moment of death an opportunity for liberation rather than fear and confusion. Robin says, depending on the level of practice of a person, a lama can guide the consciousness of a dead person through the obstacles in the afterlife, so one may attain liberation. So even though the subject is about death, it really is about life and how to live in the present. So the moment he called death is embraced as, quote, a child running into the lap of its mother. So Robin was born in Switzerland and he's lived in several countries. He was raised in a spiritual household and inclined towards spirituality since his early childhood. After graduating from the University of California, LA, he discovered Sri Aurobindo. After reading The Ideal of Human Unity, he pursued an MA in Human Behavior and Urban Planning from the United States International University, San Diego, and worked in the local San Diego County government for 4 years. He completed his degree in metaphysics from the National Academy of Metaphysics in California, studied astrology with Carol Reiter, and psychology at William Lyon University in San Diego. Robin has been initiated by Swami Veda Bharati and Pandit Rajmani of the Himalayan tradition, and was a member and officer in the Sri Satya Sai Baba organization. Of course, as we all know, he is also a horse lover, bhajan singer, and was owner of a car manufacturing enterprise for more than 2 decades. So we are very much looking forward to this talk today, Robin, and appreciate kind of your undergoing some study and research in order to share some highlights with us on this Tibetan Book of the Dead. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Robin, and as always, there will be time for questions and answers towards the end, and just put your questions in the Q&A box. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Radhe. Okay, how do I share the, do I go share screen here?
Just click on share screen. And then click on your PowerPoint when you see it come up. There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Is that awesome? Okay, good morning, everybody. Good evening to those of you on the other side of the planet here. I think it was very nice to be asked to do this presentation, and I think the time of the year is very interesting because we're in the month of Scorpio right now, which rules death. There's a lot of celebrations right now that have to do with with death. I think Dia de los Muertos is sometime around now, and there's Halloween. So anyhow, this is a very important subject, and so I'm very glad to be part of this. And Tibetan Buddhism has always been one of my favorite things to read about. I never really practiced Tibetan Buddhism, but I have read a fair amount about it. And so this was good to go and revisit some of the old books that I had on the subject. So basically, in Tibetan Buddhism is a combination of the ancient Bon religion that was prevalent in Tibet, Central Asia, and Mongolia. And then Buddhism came from India to Tibet in the 8th century. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, or the Bardo Todral, as it's known in Tibetan, has detailed descriptions of the experience one passes through at the moment of death and after death. But of greater value, it describes what we can do to prepare for death while we're still alive. While the Bardo Todral is about the transition we call death, there are many lesser bardos in our life before we meet the final termination of our earthly existence. All these bardos, which are like peak experiences, are opportunities to perfect ourselves while we have a body, so that the final bardo of death is faced with equanimity and peace, rather than fear and dread. Sogyal Rinpoche, the author of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, was a highly respected master who was the student of Jamyang Khyentse, one of the most renowned Tibetan Buddhists of the modern era. He came to the West and started many Tibetan Buddhist centers in Europe and America. The book describes in detail the experiences of death and the afterlife that a person goes through. It's a manual for both the dying process and how to live our lives in such a way that we can make the best use of our time on earth. And if we follow the teachings, we can face our death with equanimity and confidence. The purpose of the book, as Sogyal says, is to learn how to live. To learn how to die is to learn how to live. To learn how to live is to learn how to act, not only in this life, but in the lives to come. To transform yourself truly and learn how to be reborn as a transformed being to help others is really to help the world in the most powerful way of all. The goal of the practices is to achieve liberation, but not to dissolve into the absolute or flee the agony of samsara, but to choose to return again and again to devote his or her wisdom and compassion to the service of the whole world. So that's most of what I took that I have. This presentation is taken from Sogyal Rinpoche's book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. So this is slide number 1, death and dying. Life and death are in the mind and nowhere else. Mind is the universal basis of experience, the creator of happiness and the creator of suffering, the creator of what we call life and what we call death. Knowledge of what happens to us when we die and the following days is helpful in preparing ourselves for what we will one day face. The passage from this life to the next is called the bardo, which means gap, the gap between our worldly life and the life afterwards. The bardos. Tibetan Buddhism divides our entire existence into 4 bardos, or continuously interlinked realities. There's the natural bardo of life, the painful bardo of death, the luminous bardo of dharmata, the karmic bardo of becoming. The natural bardo of this life spans our entire life between birth and death. The teachings say how precious it is to be a human being and what is the most important thing we should do as human beings. They describe there is an aspect of our mind known as the ground of the ordinary mind. It functions like a storehouse in which the imprints of past actions caused by our negative and positive emotions are stored like seeds. When the right conditions arise, they germinate and manifest the circumstances and situations in our lives. If we have a habit of thinking in a particular pattern, positive or negative, these tendencies get triggered and provoked. With constant repetition, our inclinations and habits become steadily more entrenched and increase, gathering power. This is how they come to determine our life, our death, and our rebirth. We wonder, how will I be when I die? The answer to that is that whatever state of mind we are in now, whatever kind of person we are now, that is what we will be like at the moment of death, if we do not change. This is why it is so absolutely important to use this time to purify our mind stream and our character while we can. The quality of life in the realm of the gods may look superior to our own, but the masters say that human life is infinitely more valuable. Why? Because of the fact that we have the awareness, intelligence that are the raw materials for enlightenment, and because the very suffering that pervades this human realm is itself the very spur to spiritual transformation. Pain, grief, loss, and ceaseless frustration of every kind are there for a real and dramatic purpose, to wake us up, to enable and almost force us to break out of the cycle of samsara and so release our imprisoned splendor. The 3 stages of death. One is the ground luminosity. At the moment of death, the ordinary mind and its delusions die, and in the gap, the boundless sky-like nature of our mind is uncovered. This essential nature of the mind is the background to the whole of life and death, like the sky, which folds the whole universe in its embrace. As the body dies, the senses and subtle elements dissolve, and this is followed by the death of the ordinary aspects of our mind. Finally, nothing remains to obscure our true nature, which is revealed. What is revealed is the primordial ground of our absolute nature, which is like a pure and cloudless sky. This is called the ground luminosity, or clear light, where consciousness itself dissolves into the all-encompassing space of truth. The Tibetan Book of the Dead says of this moment, "The nature of everything is open, empty, and naked like the sky. Luminous emptiness without center or circumference, the pure and naked Rigpa dawns." The Bardo of Dharmata. Dharmata means the intrinsic nature of everything, the essence of things as they are. Dharmata is the naked, unconditioned truth, the nature of reality, the true nature of phenomenal existence. If we have the stability to recognize these manifestations as the self-radiance of our own Rigpa, we will be liberated. Otherwise, we will be unable to look at the vision of the deities, which are as bright as the sun. Instead, as a result of the habitual tendencies of previous lives, our gaze will be drawn downward into the 6 realms and will be lured into delusion. The Bardo of Dharmata is the wisdom energy of our own mind. There is no difference between the perceiver and the perceived. To enter into the experience completely is to attain liberation. The Bardo of Becoming. In this Bardo, the dead person's ordinary mind returns and takes on the manifestation of the mental body with its past habits and karma. This causes the mind to cling onto the illusory Bardo experiences as real and solid. What is unique about these 3 phases of dying is that they do not only unfold during the dying process, they're unfolding now at every moment in our minds, our thoughts, our emotions, and at all levels of our consciousness. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are essentially 3 kinds of vision. The impure karmic vision of ordinary beings, the vision of experience, which opens to practitioners in meditation and is the path or medium of transcendence, and the pure vision of realized beings. A realized being or a Buddha will perceive the world as spontaneously perfect, a completely dazzlingly pure realm. Since they have purified all the causes of karmic vision, they see everything directly in its naked primordial sacredness. Everything that we see around us is seen as it is because we have been repeatedly solidifying our inner experience and outer reality in the same way lifetime after lifetime. And this has led to the mistaken assumption that what we see is objectively real. As we transform our perception, our concepts of the world and matter and ourselves are purified and dissolved. A new heavenly field of vision and perception opens up. With most of us, however, karma and negative emotions obscure the ability to see our own intrinsic nature and the nature of reality. As a result, we clutch onto happiness and suffering as real, and in our unskillful and ignorant actions, go on sowing the seeds of our next life. Experiences of the Bardo. During the first few weeks of the Bardo, we have the impression that we're a man or a woman, just as in our previous life. We do not realize that we're dead. We return home to meet our family and loved ones. We try to talk to them. We touch them on the shoulder, but they do not reply or even show that they're aware that we're there. We watch powerless as they weep or sit stunned and heartbroken over our death. Fruitlessly, we try to make use of our belongings. Our place is no longer set at the table, and arrangements are being made to dispose of our possessions. We feel bewildered, angry, hurt, and frustrated. If we're very attached to our body, we might even try to re-enter or hover around it. In extreme cases, the mental body can linger near its possessions or body for weeks or even years. Still, it may not dawn on us that we're dead. Only when we see that we cast no shadow, make no reflection in a mirror, leave no footprints on the ground, that we finally realize that we have died, and that can make us faint away. The duration of the Bardo. The time span of the Bardo of becoming has an average duration of 49 days and a minimum length of 1 week. Some get stuck in the Bardo and become spirits or ghosts. For the first 21 days, there's still a strong impression of the previous life, and this is the most important period for the living to be able to help the dead person. After that, the future life slowly takes shape and becomes the dominant influence. Judgment. Some accounts of the Bardo describe a judgment scene, a life review similar to those found in many of the world's cultures. What appears to be happening, though, is that we are the judge of ourselves. Can we forgive ourselves for those things we did and those things we didn't do? What matters was our intention and motivation behind every act, because there's no escaping the effects of our past actions. We're entirely responsible not only for this life, but for our future lives as well. The power practice, the transference of consciousness. This is a practice that anyone can do. It is simple, but it is also the most essential practice we can do to prepare for our own death. And it is the main practice that I teach, that's Sogyal, that he teaches his students for helping dying friends and relatives and their loved ones who have already died. Through this practice, you're investing your mind in the wisdom mind of the Buddha or enlightened being, which is the same as surrendering your soul into the nature of God. How do we best prepare for death? Impermanence. One of the ways this is done is by contemplating deeply on the secret of impermanence. What is beyond impermanence and death leads directly to the nature of the mind. Realization of the nature of the mind, which is our inmost essence, the truth we all search for, is the key to understanding life and death. Only then will we be prepared when it reveals itself spontaneously and powerfully at the moment of death, and be able to recognize it naturally as a child running into its mother's lap. If we're unable to maintain this state, if we are able to maintain this state, it is said we will be liberated. What can we do to best prepare ourselves for the future? Meditation. Learning to meditate is, in Tibetan Buddhism, thought to be the greatest gift that we can give ourselves. Meditation is the road to enlightenment. If the mind can settle naturally of its own accord and we can rest in pure awareness, then we do not need any method of meditation. If we can naturally reach such a state, it might be unskillful to employ a method. It is through practicing the method skillfully, that we reach the perfection of that pure state of total presence, which is real meditation. Meditation is not something we do, it is something that happens when the practice has been perfected. The posture should be unshakable and steadfast, like the majesty of a mountain. This is also very similar to the practices in yoga. The back should be erect and straight. The Dzogchen teachings say that the eyes should be open during meditation. The gaze should be like the vast expanse of the ocean, all-pervading, open, limitless. The gaze should not focus on anything in particular, but become more expansive, peaceful, and compassionate. According to the special luminosity practice of Dzogchen, all the light of our wisdom energy resides in the heart center, which is connected through wisdom channels to the eyes. The eyes are the doors of the luminosity, so you keep them open in order not to block the wisdom channels. A description of the nature of the mind naturally leads into a complete instruction of meditation. Meditation is the only way we can repeatedly uncover and gradually realize and stabilize the nature of the mind. In Buddhism, there are many methods of meditation, but there are three that are very effective in pacifying the mind. They're using an object, reciting a mantra, and watching the breath. Each of these methods forms a complete meditation practice on its own. However, combining them into one practice can be very effective. The three methods work in turn on the three aspects that we're composed of: body, speech, and mind. The heart of the practice, Dzogchen. The training of the Dzogchen path is described in terms of the view, meditation, and action. The view is to see directly the absolute state, the ground of our being. Meditation is the way of stabilizing the view and making it an unbroken experience. Action is integrating the view into our entire reality and life. In Dzogchen, the view is introduced to the student directly by the master. What is transmitted is the direct experience of the wisdom mind of the Buddhas, through the blessing of a master who embodies its complete realization. When a student is sufficiently prepared, the master cuts through the conceptual mind, and the true nature of the mind, the face of Rigpa, is revealed. The summary of the Dzogchen teachings is, this comes from a book by the Dalai Lama called the Dzogchen, Heart Essence of the Great Perfection. And he says, perhaps the most important aspect of Dzogchen teachings is how to live without creating more karma, or like writing in water. where our actions are free of consequences which can draw us back into samsara. If in meditation the mind is only relaxed into a state of stillness, it will get sidetracked into the samadhi of the gods. The mind is still susceptible to attachment, anger, aversion, and so on. So this state of mind is not free from karmic consequences and experiences joy, sadness, illness, and misfortune. The key is to be able to maintain the natural, genuine mindfulness and recognize the true nature of whatever thoughts arise and sustain the ground for liberation, the self-arising rigpa. Then every thought that arises is liberated because it finds no resting place, no harbor. If at this point the thoughts are not liberated, as they arise, the karmic chain is not cut and the delusion persists. Since you remain within the experience of Rigpa, thoughts which are self-arising are liberated within that space of Rigpa. If your practice goes well, any thoughts that arise are simply upheavals and tests of the energy of Rigpa, and so they serve as food, only nourishing and increasing your experience of the naked union of Rigpa and emptiness. They leave no trace and are innately pure. And he says, what joy that is. So that's the end of my main presentation. And I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to add here in conclusion. And that is, the architecture of human beings is the same across all religions, cultures, languages, etc. Whatever we choose to call it, we all have a sense of self. We all possess consciousness. We all seek freedom from suffering and pain. We aspire for freedom, love, and joy. Faith is essential to life across all spiritual paths. Devotion to a teacher or the divine is necessary for spiritual aspiration. Methods may differ in details, but they all come down to living from the heart. Secondly, virtually everyone who has experienced an NDE, a near-death experience, does not want to come back to this world. I think it's safe to say that there is no reason to fear death, just the opposite. If we had the opportunity, we would probably like to stay on the other side as well. It is lack of knowledge of the other side that frightens us. This book gives us reason to view the afterlife with confidence and shows a path on how to live in this life so that we can perfect ourselves while we're here. In an absolute sense, we really do not die. We leave this body, but if we live well and practice diligently, life becomes magical, perfect, and full of luminous joy, and the transition from this physical world to the other one after is unbroken and full of light. The world we see as outside ourselves is a manifestation of our internal consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Matter is mind in manifestation. By residing in the clear light, the ground luminosity, everything becomes perfect. It takes care of us, protects us, and works towards our own perfection. So those are some little concluding thoughts. That's it. Does anybody have any questions or thought, comments?
Yeah,
This is
thank
a
you.
very complex subject, and if anybody would like any further information about it, I'll be happy to see what I can do about providing it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very rich topic and very unique in a way because Bardo is the development which took place long ago. It's a pre-Buddhistic system, but when Buddhism was adopted in Tibet, was taken, then it took this form of the Buddhistic teaching. But truly speaking, it comes from the shamanistic tradition of, Bonpo and other sects which lived there before Buddhism. The same as in Mongolia, we have shamanistic traditions. They were very curious about what is happening in life and afterlife. They saw it as a one long journey process of oneness. And that actually created this unique view on our life in the Buddhistic tradition, in Lamaistic tradition rather than Buddhistic, because Lamaism is a bit different. So the Tibetan Buddhism is closer to this, Lamaistic tradition. We call it even Lamaism. So from here, these lamas are being reborn. They are tracing lamas over time. They look for the signs. Lama already says which signs he will leave in the future reincarnations. So they are looking for it immediately to catch with a young boy and to make him a lama. It happened to every lama. So this is a very amazing system which deals with death as reality and has its own, kind of geographical picture, where to go, how to behave in every step, in every region beyond death. So it develops the whole psychology beyond life. And of course, there are some questions here. You can see it yourself. Please talk more about the 23 days after death and how the souls can be helped to move on. How is there a way to know if the souls did not move on? Is there a way to know that the soul did not move on?
It did move on.
That's the lamas were specially trained in this to guide people, and like they said, if we achieve the highest state, then a person can maintain a sense of continuity from their worldly life into the afterlife. But for a lot of people who were not able to do that, the lamas couldn't guide them through the afterlife. And it's kind of a little bit like trying to be conscious during a dream. When events happen in a dream, can you be conscious and make a decision in a dream? That requires some practice to do that. The lamas could actually intercede on the part of the person who is passing and guide them so that they don't go down into those lower 6 realms that they talk about of samsara. And if you can actually stay with the clear light, with the luminosity that is the ground of our being, then you can become liberated. And so, and what surprises me about this Lamaistic tradition is that they knew so much about the afterlife, the whole process of the afterlife. It's like they had scoped all of this out and knew it intimately. And also they described the capacity of the person. After we die, we become extremely clairvoyant. We see everything that is going on. They even say, if your relatives are squabbling about your possessions after you passed on, that will disturb you. And that just that alone can cause you to come back into samsara. So developing a sense of compassion and forgiveness for ourselves and for everybody else is vital in our ability to navigate this path after we pass on. So they describe the clairvoyance that we develop. We can see the past, we can see the future, we can know things that they say, like our abilities to know things are like 7 times enhanced. Our feelings in the afterlife, both of joy and suffering, are increased dramatically. So the people who suffer a lot more intensely in the afterlife than we do in this life. And one of the things that they say about this is they talk about the wrathful deities and the beneficent deities. All of those manifestations that occur, they seem to be occurring outside us, are actually projections of what we have inside us. They ultimately come back inside, back to us. And so we see them on the outside, and they can be very dramatic. There's they say a lot of thunder, noise like thunder, and brilliant light that we can't look at. So it's a dramatic experience. And if we get shaken, the whole key is that we have to be able to weather these states and not be shaken by them and go into the light. If we follow the light and the luminosity, then we can be liberated. And also it was brought up that, some people think that the goal of everything is just to be liberated. It's actually not that. It's actually to become a really useful human being and come back to the world and go through samsara again and help other beings to become liberated.
What made me think about this liberation, which you all the time referring to, because the whole idea of Buddhism is liberation, is that in the integral yoga, the soul is to pass through, stages of dealing with vital emotions, desires, and so on, and then dealing with the mental formations, dogmas, structures, and finally coming into the psychic world for rest. And, and that is, I think, liberation in a way. Liberation from all the luggage which we kind of acquired in our lifetime. We drop it off into that, equilibrium in life plane and mental plane. We drop off into that, reservoir of thoughts and feelings, emotions, energies. We strip ourselves off, so the soul becomes free from them. And that is freedom. Freedom is to be again ready for new reincarnation. And when you said about this, that to be a good human being, to be ready to continue reincarnations in a purer way, it made me think that maybe this is the liberation they are talking of. Because experientially it feels like that. If you come to the pure soul state, it will be felt as liberation. It's a kind of thought in the passing. There are more questions here.
I just wanted to also maybe before you go on, just ask a question if I can, Vladimir.
Please go ahead.
And it may be one of the questions down there. I haven't read them all, but I'm curious, Rob, this is all new to me. I'm very unfamiliar with this Tibetan Book of the Dead, so you may have covered this. But I see in some of the questions referral to souls. But as you spoke and you went through those slides, it was uncertain to me as to whether there is a belief in what we would call in integral yoga, the divine, or what we might also refer to maybe as the unborn one, or even the psychic being, the soul. Is there that notion? I mean, you mentioned gods. But is there a notion of this divine, this ultimate divine one, or this kind of inner psychic being? Although you referred to the heart, I didn't actually hear kind of this reference to a soul. What is their belief around these notions that are obviously fundamental to integral yoga?
They view it a little bit differently in Tibetan Buddhism. And that reference to God was something that I think Sogyal had, he realized who he was talking to. It wasn't actually something that's part of Tibetan Buddhism. But yes, I believe, and I'll say this because if anybody knows better than me, feel free to jump in, that actually it's really, we are like a wave in the ocean. We're part of the absolute consciousness, this ground luminosity that they talk about, and we are we're the same as that ground luminosity. We're as perfect as that is. The goal of human life is to realize that, and like a wave is just the same as the sea, it appears to have its individuality, which, some people would refer to as a soul, but they don't actually, I don't believe they refer to it that way. What we are is we're a stream of consciousness. We have qualities, individualized qualities and it's those qualities that go from birth to birth and reincarnate. So they don't use God, they don't use the word soul. So it's a stream of consciousness, qualities of consciousness. And
It sounds
I
like it's more this oneness, realizing our oneness with the ocean as an important
yeah,
spiritual aim.
and I think even in other traditions, once we merge into that oneness, what happens to our individuality? It's do we exist as separate souls? We exist as elements of consciousness. So
what makes me think of from this is it's the major question of Buddhism and relation to Advaita Vedanta and to the Hinduism in general, especially Vedic knowledge. Is that there was a debate in the Middle Ages in India between the Dharmikas, between the Advaitins, and between Dharmikas who were Buddhists. Buddhism was very well spread all over India before Advaita took over. And it is in the history of philosophy, it is described that Buddhism lost this battle because these battles were constantly these debates between different forms of religion. Dharmikas were debating with Advaitins because they couldn't explain what is being liberated. It's exactly that question which Radha brought forward. They couldn't say what it is because there is no soul to be liberated. Then what is this being liberated, and what is this being reincarnated? So in that battle they lost and they left India. That's why India has very little Buddhism now. They went to Tibet, they went to China and to the Far East, to Japan. They settled there. Yeah, and it's quite interesting just from the point of view of history of religion. But yes, there is something, someone is liberated. When soul is liberated, the psychic being is liberated, then something happens. It falls into its own state of being. And that may be very difficult to explain. And Buddhism is closer to the psychology rather than metaphysics. It's not really a philosophy of life. It's more what is really happening, yes, to you. It looks at the world subjectively, totally subjectively. And in that sense, it may not have the sense of the soul, because subjective look is already the look of the soul. Yeah? So
I was thinking too, Vladimir, you mentioned that it's this Tibetan, if I understand you right, this Tibetan Buddhism is unique from the other forms of Buddhism in that it is more shamanistic, if you will, has elements of shamanism. And that shamanism really goes back to that magical period where we're all one with nature, we're all one with each other. And so this idea of putting emphasis on individuality, as in kind of the individual soul, isn't relevant in that sort of belief system or philosophical system. So coming back to this realization of oneness, Robin, that you emphasize that we're all part of the one ocean, I see also kind of as unique, and that may be with all of the different strains of Buddhism, but seems particularly true of this because of the shamanistic nature of Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes, and especially this book of the living and dead, that they have that experience because it's very shamanistic in a way. Yeah. We find it in the Mongolian shamanism. Mongolian and Tibetan were very close, yeah? And then they got developed through Buddhism. They adopted Buddhism and brought that language of Buddhism into their own practice. There are a few more questions here. Can we only work for liberation of our individual self, or can we support others to shift over? And that is the Book of the Dead is about this.
Yeah. Yes, we can be a huge help to people who've passed on. And there's no limit to how long ago. People who died centuries ago. If we do certain practices, the power practice that they suggest, we can do that for people, for ourselves before we die, for those people who are dying, who recently passed, and for people who died a long time ago, for our ancestors, for our parents, grandparents, and so on, friends, whoever. It's a very beneficial practice, they say, for everyone, maybe even for the world.
Yeah, I was surprised when I was studying it long ago in the university, the Bordeaux, and that the person sits near the person who is passing, or already dead, so to say, and whispers into his ear the path which he has to take, and the dangers he has to meet, and the attitude he has to take on the every turn of the path. So he leads him on the way. So this is kind of additional to this question whether we can help. You can help directly even to the person who is passing. Speaking to the person, and person hears very well, as you rightly said, has very good, clear audience. He can hear well what you say, see what you do. So in that sense, it can be very helpful, most probably. Yes.
Yeah.
So there are more questions here. Very powerful topic, especially understanding more about the lesser bardos. Could you elaborate more in this part, lesser bardos?
Yeah, I was thinking that death, the actual process of dying, they say, is the greatest, the most powerful experience that we will have in life. But there are other experiences, like if you have a close call, or a peak experience. That would be a term that we could use in modern terminology. Some event in our life that had a huge impact on us. It could have been an illness that we survived, or an accident, or jumping out of a plane. It could be. There's all kinds of lesser events in our life that stay with us, and all of these events are experiences that we can use to reflect on, and that help us along the way. And there's a lot of emphasis is put on on reflecting on our lives, our state of mind. And I know I think all of us have a dialogue that goes on in our head, and it's increasing our ability to understand what actually is happening to us. Not to get locked into certain patterns of thinking and feeling, because those are the things that will reoccur in the afterlife. What we have to do is we have to transform those things that play in our consciousness, so that we achieve a state of peace and equanimity with them, because we will experience those in the afterlife. We'll see those. They'll become very clear to us. So while we're living now, this is when we have this the intelligence and the ability to make changes in our psyche. This is the time that we should really, really take this up seriously, because it has consequences. If we don't do it, then we get to do it again. And so that's the importance that we should place on our current life.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. There are a few more questions. Is there a result from so many souls passing at the same time through wars? Result upon this collective earth? Well, it's a very interesting question. What do you think? What is your thought about it?
Do you have any thoughts, Vladimir?
Well, there must be something. There must be something. We observed it in the Second World War when it happened. Yes, there was a loss of millions of people, and there was a gap, and then there was a flood of newborn. There's something happening there in that transition beyond life.
I think also, Jesus spoke of this. He said that the harvest is ripe. And I think that in the cycle of evolution, of human evolution on the earth, there are times, when we're growing, we're expanding, we're developing our capacities, civilizations are becoming more sophisticated. And then we reach a point where we're really ripe, just like fruit on a tree. And then, the fruit begins to fall off. And I think that that happens with societies, it happens with cultures. Cultures become ripe, they achieve a climax and a zenith, and then they disappear. And that's happened with many cultures in the past in the world. And they can disappear, like the Mayan civilization disappeared in a real hurry. And across the world, this has happened in many places. So I think that there is a time when the harvest is ripe, and then the powers that bring creation into manifestation decide, okay, this group of humanity is ready, has reached what we consider a completion, and then perhaps there'll be death on a large, fairly large scale.
Yeah, there are other things to mention here, that the nations, for example, the formations of the national soul, nation soul, and they are living entities of the spirit which support people in their development, in their land, culture, history, language, and they keep the people in that kind of surrounding, in that environment. And then somebody asked Sri Aurobindo this question, which is in the evening talks, what happens to those people when they lose their language, culture, history? So what happens to them? What happens to the nation soul? And he says, if there are no more carriers of this culture, language, and memory, then the nation soul dissolves itself in the spirit, in its origin, where it came from. So there's something interesting. I was thinking about this when you said about Mayan civilization or other civilizations here in America. Where did they go? Where that nation spirit go? Where there is nobody there to manifest it, So it most probably dissolves in the spirit, or is still there waiting for a new opportunity to form its people, maybe something like this. We are talking about collective formations, collective individuals, not about individuals now. So this is a big topic, very interesting topic, unknown to us. There are more questions, 6 more. Please talk more about the source of this knowledge of continuing life. If by revelation, through whom was it communicated? If by experience, whose experience?
That was one of the things I thought that was so fascinating about this, is that these lamas, how did they go to the other side and understand all of this and come back and teach it to someone? They had to have the capacity to go into the other worlds, to witness all of this as it happened, the conditions of it, and then come back and, so that's an amazing ability to be able to do that. And so I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that question other than
It
that.
is them most probably who were teaching. That's why they are lamas, and they have that capacity to look beyond, physical existence, have that experience, and bring it to the living. To secure, if Dalai Lama remembers his birth from before and has that transition, then most probably that knowledge is somewhere there to teach others. It's not written in the books except the Bardo book, yes, as an instruction book, but otherwise it is given in secrecy. It's an occult knowledge within their tradition. Why is a human life on earth considered to be higher state than that of the gods? Tempting question.
They give a description of in the book of what the life of the gods is like, and you can compare it, perhaps an earthly counterpart of it would be if you could have everything you wanted and you satisfy all of your desires. Say you were a billionaire, you could afford anything that you wanted, and eat as much as you wanted, have as many cars or boats or whatever, and you weren't going to die. You'd eventually get to a point where you just don't like anything, because nothing is really satisfying anymore, because it's like when having too much dessert, you can't stand any more dessert. So they actually long to become human beings, because it's as a human being that we can experience all of the wonderful experiences that there are to experience as a human being. There's challenges to it, but this is where we can actually grow. And when you think about it, as a human being, just for ourselves, if we could live 1,000 years, would we really want to live 1,000 years? There's a time, there's a phase in life. Life has phases, and there's times to be this way or that way, and eventually there's a good time to leave this planet and to start over and not have memory of the past. So, and I think that's why we don't remember our previous lives, is because think of all the baggage that we'd have with us. So the gods, they are faced with this problem of, I think, perhaps oversaturation is maybe the word to use. And they describe the death, actually, it's kind of weird, but the gods actually do come to an end of their life. And that's in the book. I don't remember that explicitly, so I can't really talk about it.
This is an interesting topic, because the Vedic gods are also, all the gods are kind of forgotten or renamed or recaptured in the worship of human beings. They are needed here to help the soul grow according to the Vedic vision, and they are typal beings. And if you ask whether somebody would want to live 1,000 years, kind of given security of 1,000 years of life, I think the whole psychology and behavior would change. And you would not go for dessert all the time, definitely. You will change your direction or your aspiration towards the progress and growth of consciousness, because that is the only thing which may satisfy you on the path, and not necessarily falling back into the, enjoyments of ordinary life. So this is my thought, Vana. You said whether we would want to live 1,000 years or not. I would want that security, because then you can do so many things, so many powers, new powers, divine powers you can bring into action. You can sacrifice constantly this being to the higher and higher consciousness and grow in it. So this is another dimension of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, it would require a dramatic change in how we are to even want to live 1,000 years. But yeah, like you say, if we had that aspiration, then it would be useful time well spent.
Absolutely. So there is one more. Please discuss the concept of delaying cremation of a body for a minimum 7 days. Is 7 days a minimum for a longer delay being desirable, with a longer delay being desirable? 7 days or more.
They say for the first 3 days, it's essential. It's best to not even touch the body or move it, because for 3 days the person is still, the consciousness is still very much around the body, and depending that's for normal, ordinary people. In the case of Jamyang Khyentse, when he passed away in 1959, he passed away in Bhutan. Many people from old Tibet came to Bhutan to be in his presence before he passed away, and then they kept streaming in after he passed away. They left his body out in the open, and for 6 months his body stayed in a luminous state of being. His body didn't decompose. There was some very unusual events around his passing. There was a huge earthquake. There was a luminous light over the entire area surrounding where he was, and and he also appeared in a monastery in Tibet. He just materialized in the lap of the Maitreya in this monastery that he had started, because people there had very close relationship with him. So it depends on the person and their level of awareness. And I think what's really interesting is that if we really practice profoundly while we're alive, it makes a dramatic transformation, both in all levels of our being, including the physical body. And by evidence of the fact that his body just didn't decompose. And it didn't say after 6 months what happened, whether they cremated him or whether they what happened to his body.
Yeah, these are famous stories of other saints also who are staying. Even Sri Aurobindo stayed for 5 days luminous in the body after leaving the body, which was quite miraculous for that climate in the south. It's possible in the mountains where it is cool, but in the south where it is moisture and heat, nobody stays longer than a few days. Is there a way soul communicates? Is there a way that soul communicates with someone, I guess?
The soul who's passed. They can communicate with us. I think it's a question of whether we can have the sensitivity to feel their presence, to understand what they're trying to say to us, because they're there. And there's numerous examples of people who've passed away who, they walk around their house just like they were there for several days until they finally leave. So it's a question of whether we have the sensitivity to see them.
Yeah, maybe in the state of sleep, we most probably could communicate with them easier than in the awakened state. Some people have these experiences, many, yes, who could see the spirit coming back and so on, even in awakened state. It's quite common.
Mm-hmm.
What are the dead people doing? Where are they if they do not find the way to the next place? Are they all around us?
Some are. um,
The Sixth
and
Sense. You remember the movie Sixth Sense? No? Okay.
yeah, but it's not a good thing. We can keep people here if we have if we miss them intensely, then we can actually prevent someone from leaving and going to where they really should go and where they would go if we didn't have a big attachment to them. So yes, there can be people around, and there's they call them haunted houses. You know, I know a very recent example of somebody who had who had a house where the lights were going on and off on their own, and doors would open and close, and so yeah, they're around, but it would be better, I think, if they were not here.
Yeah.
They're trapped in the lower worlds.
Yeah, for a while, for some time, and then they will have eventually to leave, yes, sooner or later, sooner rather than later. There is more question here. As the time closer to death, how is physical suffering, pain, is it possible to avoid the pain if we had achieved certain level of meditation, samadhi or so?
I think the illness, which is the source of pain, if we practice, then, and if we dissolve our karma while we're here, then, which is really the goal, then we won't experience, the kind of terminal illnesses that people often suffer from. That's one way of burning up karma. And if we practice and work the pure state through our entire physique, through all the aspects of our psyche and consciousness, then there's no reason to be ill, and that's a big challenge. That's a lot of work that it takes to do that. So it's well, Vladimir, what do you think?
No, so this is the question to answer in different views. I was thinking about karma, what you said, to dissolve karma. And in the integral yoga, the karmic being or karmic consequences are built through building more steady, more conscious mental and vital being, closer to the center, closer to the soul. So basically we acquire a specific capacity to be able to act in accordance with our achievements, which is showing the evolution of the being. The psychic being becomes more and more evolved, involving mind and vital, builds its own kind of mental and vital beings, and till the moment they become even immortal, and they are becoming those who are defining our karmic consequences or karmic behavior or attitudes in the next reincarnations. So we can see at karma very differently from whether we want to dissolve it and have nothing, to be pure naked soul and dissolve into the spirit, or we want to engage the manifestation and build more open instruments to be more open to the influence of the spirit and the soul. And so karma in the Veda is something very interesting. Karma is not these consequences. It is the sacrifice. Karma and karoti, kronoti, these words are indicating the sacrifice, the involvement of the spirit in matter, in the mind, in the vital, creating its own agents, transforming mind, vital, and body into its own instruments. So that is karma. Yeah? Later it changed its meaning into that something which we have to get rid of. But truly speaking, it's a big question what we have to do with it.
Yeah, what you said is viewing it from a top-down way rather than a bottom-up. Getting rid of karma is like looking at it from the bottom up. If we aspire and become our more perfect self, as we train our mind and our thoughts and our behavior to be more aligned with that, then all of those negative aspects leave us, and that's actually a better way, rather than we shouldn't focus on getting rid of karma. That was not the appropriate way to say it. It's a backwards way of saying it.
Right. We have to build a proper, luminous, spiritual karma. By the way, the Tibetan Buddhism is also about this. Yes, how to live life, which would give you the proper kind of path to the beyond and back to embodied state. So there are two more questions, and we will close on this. Do we get reborn with the contact to play a certain role to help the collective learning evolution, or does our development depend on what we experience when we are born? Do you understand the question? You can see it most probably also, yes?
If I understand the question correctly, it was like saying how much of our life is predetermined and how much of it is our own experience and more our determination. If that's correct. Not so much from the Tibetan Buddhist viewpoint, but from some of the other things that I've known and studied, which is more along the lines of Hinduism and yoga, is that we actually, there's a plan for us. At least this is what I've what I've heard and read, is that there is a plan and a format kind of for our lives. And that our actual ability to choose when it comes to free choice is not very great. We actually, there's a role that we have to play that was, I think, set. And our ultimate feeling of success and happiness and fulfillment comes from actually performing that role well. And our actual ability to choose and to decide one way or another is actually rather limited. It's not, we don't have a whole lot of latitude. We come in that way. We're born that way because that's our consciousness determines that. And so
I think also, Robin, maybe that question, if I'm reading that right too, is questioning whether our karma goes beyond our individual karma, and if there's kind of a like an integral yoga, an aspect of the karma is universal in nature, and so having karma that will help at the evolution of humanity, and not always specific and narrowly to oneself, but more of a group karma or universal karma that plays a role. I think if I understand it right, that's the question. Is there a certain role to help the collective learning of evolution? Is there a role of karma in the collective learning?
The soul which comes to be embodied, whether it plays the role for the society or for its own sake only, based on its own experience.
Definitely, that people are born who move the world, who change the world. I think Napoleon came up as somebody who was, I think he was called a vibhuti. So, yes, people are definitely born who can transform the way the world is, and cause great shifts in consciousness. And I think each of us, we play a small part in this. Whatever role we have, it might be a very small role. It might be a completely obscure role, but that doesn't mean that we are, in fact, let me rephrase that. We are having an effect on the whole. Any transformation that each of us individually makes is affecting everything else in creation, in the universe, not just in the world. So this is that idea of us all being interlinked, which is very difficult to imagine, that each person is interlinked with everybody and everything. But so, yeah, we can have a dramatic transformation. We are having a big transformation. Whether we do anything or not, we have an equivalent influence on creation.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice. Yeah. It must be both. It can't be only one. Of course, everything which we experience, we live in this reservoir of mental and vital and physical nature. It's what we achieved. Our achievements are left behind, and we move forward. Yeah. So we learn from it. We experience. We get learning by experiencing it, and we leave the results for the future generations. All bad or good. Yeah.
There's a statement in the Old Testament that I remember, and this is the Lord speaking. He says, "Give me one righteous man, and I'll raise the entire world." So, if just one person is perfect, then the entire world can be raised as a result of that.
One soul lifted up the race. Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, it's one line. One soul can lift up the whole race.
Yeah.
There is one last question, and we will stop at this. Could you give us any reference or source about helping ancestors or people who died a long time ago?
Yeah, the power practice, which I didn't go into the details of, but it's a very simple process. It can be used to help people who died a long time ago. If you have specific ancestors, then you can do the practice for them individually, for sure. Doesn't matter how long ago it was.
Yeah, can you give any reference where we can find some literature about it or something? Is there?
Yeah, it's the description of the exercise is in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche, and if they don't want to do that, I can. If they email me, I'll be happy to send them. I have it written out, so I can send the exercise.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Please email us, and Robin will send you the answer. And Radhe, would you like to say something on this?
No, I'm just going to help Robin out here. I'm going to put his email in the chat box to go ahead and contact him directly if you have any questions on this. But I would just say, Robin, this has been a very fascinating topic, and I loved both your overview of it and also your perspective and the questions that came from our attendees. So very, very much appreciated. Very, very nice and illuminating. Thank you.
Very lovely. Thank you
Very much,
Robin.
Thank you. Bye.
Wonderful. See you.